Hold on, there it
That's
goes.
okay.
You're all set.
All right, all right. So it's 6:01. The Budget and Finance Committee is all here, so I'll call the meeting to order on what are we? January 24th, 22. All right. Excellent.
You muted yourself.
I muted him by accident. I'm sorry.
That's all right. You have the power that Dennis has always wanted.
Not just Dennis.
No, just me.
Right. Y'all heard that I called the meeting to order, right? For
Yes, I did.
the 24th. Okay. All right.
Yep.
Is there, I don't see any public. There's no public for public comment, right?
There's no public.
All right. Do we have any minutes?
You have none.
None. Okay. All right. So we'll launch right into the loan order for the upgrade of the wastewater treatment facility, which is FY 22-033 for an order of $43 million. And we had some discussion at the last meeting, which I thought was beneficial and it's probably going to help us out tonight. So I'll ask the first question because I know Dennis has probably got some questions, Sean, too. So, so Tony, if we don't approve this, the whole thing falls flat and we don't get it done and we have EPA fines and all that stuff. But I asked a question the other night, which is if we were to delay it in the hopes that a cubic yard of concrete would drop in price, you know, what effect does that have to us? And are we really just in a you know, a sticking point right here?
To answer that, I would say this. We know that infrastructure money, a good chunk of infrastructure money is going to the SRF, okay? And that's why we're looking at the principal forgiveness and then SRF loan at 0%. We're already in the queue. Our plan was approved. This is to give the final, yes, we've had appropriation as per our environmental partners, Helen. So this ensures that we are right in line to receive those benefits of using SRF money. If we were not, and we were to delay, then we would not be in line, we'd be moved out of line and have to go back at a later date and to, you know, reapply or get us in the queue for SRF funding. And so that could jeopardize our principal forgiveness and our interest rate. To what extent? I couldn't answer it. That's a crystal ball. Bird in the hand here is we get 0% and we get I believe it's about a 6.6% of the eligible cost as principal forgiveness, which is $2.6 million. The 37.5 million would be at 0%. And the remaining we're going to fund through on phase one from retained earnings in that fund. So now we know what we know. We know what we know. We don't know what we don't know if we were to jeopardize this.
Right. Okay. Other questions, Dennis, Sean?
I mean, I don't think we heard that principal forgiveness number the other night, but that's something. But there should be more. There should be more forgiveness, and I don't know. I just think we need to say that what have we been doing for 3 years, where we're not looking for other partners to get in on this with us, and mainly since it was revealed at the hearing last week that 30% of the usage of that wastewater facility is from BSU. You know, what are they contributing?
All right. So by the nature of a tiered I don't know why there's feedback. By the nature of a tiered rate structure, and that's what we have, you would put BSU at the higher tier. So for instance, those users that are at tier 1, we have 17% of our users. Make sure I have the right percentage in front of me here. 17% of our revenue comes from tier 1 users, all right? That wouldn't include BSU. So their rate is 1 rate per 100 cubic meters of water. When you go to tier 3, so let's just, for example, now it's 0.0243 cents per cubic meter for those who are on tier 1. It jumps to 0.0690 for those who are on tier 3. So by the nature of our tiered structure, 60% of our revenue comes from tier 1, those who are being billed at tier 1, 2, and 3. So we've structured it that those who consume more, that are really putting a demand, pay a higher percent towards revenue. So by the nature of that structure, they will be paying in more than our tier 1 users, because the rate that we use to calculate what they have to pay in is at a different rate. So right away, we know that our high tier users are going to pay more as we go forward to pay for this debt. As far as bringing them on board, I think we've been waiting to bring them on board until we knew what we were bringing them on board to. And I think Helen outlined that along the way. We are now clear at 90% design what this cost to the community is going to be. And as such, I know Mr. Dutton just joined us. Then what we're going to do, and we've already started to do, is schedule some meetings and begin to work with DCAM, and he can speak more to that. But in fact, they may have access to additional infrastructure revenue that we could take advantage of. Prior to infrastructure revenue being there, we would be tapping into what they have available. And I would suspect, and I'll let Michael speak to this, that there's more opportunity today than there would have been a year ago. So timing is everything, and we have the facts now in which to engage in conversations. Michael?
Well, I think going back to Bill's point, I mean, I think that the state or whoever, DCAM, wherever it has, should give us a little leniency in finally approving this in the sense of, we want to know those things. I think we want to know those things. But we just say, here's $43 million. Now we're on the hook. But remember, we already approved this. This has been approved.
Dennis, Dennis, that's going to jeopardize our ability to move forward with SRF. DCAM is a separate entity that we would look to get some funding, because they really is some, and again, I'll let Michael speak to this, they have the relationship with BSU. And because of the burden we will be feeling here in the town of Bridgewater, we're going to do everything we can to get them to step up. However, we need to make sure that we get in line and stay in line with these particular terms that we're talking about, the 0% and the 6.6% forgiveness. I don't think we can delay this.
So I'd only add, if I could, it's important to remember that the permits are really driven not so much by DEP, Mass DEP. The permits are driven by federal EPA. So to the extent that we can appeal to the state for grant funding or for earmarks or for additional ARPA funds, that'll be great. But I don't know that the state is in a position to grant us any extra time to meet the discharge permit. So that's and unfortunately, that's just EPA Region 1, which we are in, has sort of a policy across the board that they're really going to press on the discharge permits. Now, that's not to say that we're not going to look for relief there, because we certainly are. At the very least, we're going to look for a substantial delay in phasing in, phase 2. But in terms of actually lightening up on the discharge requirements, I don't see that happening at all.
So, Tony, I understand what you're saying in regards to that. I guess where I'm struggling with this is it is truly a balancing act in regards to this. So if we go forward at 44 million, which is a substantial increase, and overall, it's a substantial amount, considering that not all of Bridgewater is going to take the burden on this. Obviously, just the people that are customers of sewer. So that's a big chunk of change in itself. But we've already identified, because of COVID, that we've got some significant increases in hard costs that, from what we're starting to see in general, I'm not looking at it to Bill's point for concrete, but in general, we're starting to see some economists see that, at least on the material side, that we're going to see some pretty substantial decreases where you're not seeing a 2x4 at $38 a board type scenario. So I know that we want to get into a program very lucrative, in regards to the SRF program, but on the flip side, we get into a program where there's something involved in regards to a rate, and these programs, from what I've seen, don't go crazy on the rate. We can reduce that overall cost. In the long run, it actually may be beneficial to the ratepayers than us going forward with this with astronomically high costs because of factors out of our control, just to get into a 0% program. And I get it with a 6% forgivable rate. I just don't know if I'm really want to go forward with that when we may have the opportunity. I'm not saying we don't do it, because we have to, but if we delay this to see where costs come down on the hard costs, in the long run, we may end up saving the ratepayers money in the long run.
Well,
I don't have an answer. I wish I did, because I'd be doing something totally different, but it's a pretty significant hit, even on what we initially approved. So I'm looking at it from the ratepayers' perspective. This is big to swallow at 33. Now we're talking 42.
So
This is just phase 1.
I got two pieces of information. One, when we go out to bid, and Michael can give you, when we would go for construction bid on this project and so forth, there will be some lag time. Helen, who does this for a living and has done it for over 30 years, has her insight, and she provided it last meeting that she didn't anticipate we'd see a significant reduction in that. And the other one that I think we'd have to take into consideration is, and I know these users are going to bear the burden, but just like those who don't have sewer, they have been required to upgrade their systems to Title V standards, and they have been paying between $30,000 and $50,000 a system. And if you would allocate that over the useful life of a septic system, those costs far exceed the costs that they will incur if they have a 30-year system under the rate changes. There's no doubt that they are getting a benefit that for the cost of that benefit, it's significantly cheaper to be part of a septic system than it is, a sewer system, than it is a septic system. It is.
Understanding that, Tony, though, and Michael, maybe you know the answer to this, I don't. What percentage of the town has access to centralized sewer?
It's about a third.
Okay, so
Yeah.
the counter argument to that, Tony, is people have to pay that because they don't have any alternative other than to have septic. And Title V is a state mandate that is out of our control. That's up to the individual. That's up to the individual to bring it up to the Title V perspective. I don't think we have anyone sitting there that doesn't have access to sewer. Well, I'm speculating here a little bit. Don't get. To your point, if I had the option, which I don't, if I had the option, I would be on town sewer. I wouldn't be on septic.
Right,
I'm a big. I don't have that option though, Tony. So
right.
to position it that way around it's more expensive.
So what I'm saying is there is a
go on
cost to
septic. Hold on,
maintaining.
to go on. I understand that, but you also don't have a choice in a lot of scenarios. So I don't know if that really is a
Yeah.
good
Well,
balance.
I don't think we have a choice, and Michael has spoken to it. It's very similar to EPA and DEP requirements. That's what's driven Title V, and that's what's driving this plant and its discharge into the Taunton River.
Yeah,
It's the same dilemma.
right. And Tony, I'm not debating the fact that we've got to upgrade. That goes without saying. I'm looking at it from a timing perspective of how do we get the maximum bang for our buck, but understanding that at a particular point, we've got to upgrade it. Anyone who drives around Bridgewater with their windows down in the summertime knows we need a new septic plant. But, you know, where I'm looking at it is obviously we look at it from the ratepayer perspective, and it's a pretty big burden. And I think it's our job to try to minimize the financial burden as much as possible. And these are the things that we have to take into consideration around seeing just such a major increase in the projected cost of the program because of, you know, things that are going on, which down the road, and you bring up a good point about, you know, putting the bid out there, we're looking at it, and today's market especially is probably going to see some things come down that could benefit the ratepayers in the long run once the project is done. I'm not sitting here saying, how do we get around not doing this? We don't. We have to. But like anything else, timing, you want the perfect timing. I don't know if we'll ever get it, but right now it seems like the timing is not good because of just the financial perspective around the costs.
Is the sewer rate totally connected to the water usage?
Yes, it is.
Measuring outflow. So I remember the BSU tiers because we looked at it years and years ago. So depending on your sewer rates are completely dependent on your water usage.
That's correct.
Okay, all right. And what is the time frame, Michael, for when construction would begin? They're at 90% design now, assuming there's financing available somehow. At what point do they start, and how long a duration is that plan?
Good question. So the intent is, assuming the appropriation, the intent would be to go out to bid as soon as possible. Realistically, is probably the early spring. So you're April, May, March, April timeframe. Bids would be out for probably 30 to 60 days on a complex project like this. The construction process goes on, I think it was a 24-month, 2-year construction timeline, which would bring us out to what, 2024, end of 2024, 25 in that time frame.
Right. And in the bidding process, I know like the elementary school, it was a fixed bid, right? So they bid it for a certain price and they have to build it for that price. Is there any option where, and I'm not telling you how to write your contracts, but is there any option on making it a fixed cost for things like labor and other materials, but variable for something like concrete? Because it sounded like from when Helen was talking last week, that that's probably one of the largest increases that we've seen, going from like $100 to $500, and maybe it decreases in the future. We can benefit from that if it's not fixed cost, in the structure.
There are ways to structure procurement to sort of take advantage of those. The flip side is that you run the risk of it, kind of boomeranging and not working out to your advantage. But specifically, Bill, I'm not sure. I can certainly ask the question.
Oh, because what I'm thinking about here, and I'll just share it with everybody. So I'm of the mind that I think I'm in favor of supporting this. I don't like the price tag, but I'm in favor of supporting it because I think there is a need to upgrade the plant. But I also believe that material costs will probably come down. So if it were a bid sent out today, unlike, we saw benefit on the elementary school, but if we were to send it out today, it might be bid for the full 43 or whatever it comes in at. And then the contractor might benefit if concrete drops by half. So I would like to share in that benefit if that happens. But I think that, and I won't go into, although I have some questions about the EPA fines, but I think, the risk assessment there, and this was somewhat along the lines Sean was talking about, is, okay, so we overshoot their deadline. What is their fine? Is it $125 a day? Is it $10,000 a day? What is the cost for a 6-month delay? If we're in a fine structure, is it less than the decrease in the material cost if we were to wait the 6 months? I don't think we've probably done that full risk assessment. But I'm not
The
sure
only-
what the difference would be.
The last piece of information, I realize the last number you got, and this is substantial increase, right? So after we have use of retained earnings and we take out the principal forgiveness, as I said, we got about $38 million of cost at 0%. Our interest cost alone under the 2% calculation on the last estimates that we were running is approximately $4 million.
Yeah.
So by getting 0% and ensuring we're in the queue, we save $4 million in interest. Now, I could go and do a full-blown analysis, but that is substantial. That is real. So the 37 million is a true 37 million. Whereas before it might have said 32 million, all right, or 33, and we didn't have principal forgiveness. And at the time I didn't have the retained earnings, but now that we have delayed, I do have retained earnings. We're saving about $4 million in interest. So I think we have to keep that in mind. That's why the SRF at 0% to me, $4 million is $4 million.
And one final finance question. So the SRF, the principal forgiveness is chopping 6.6% off the top. Is that what that's doing?
On the eligible. So of that
And then,
total, I think $40 million is eligible for the SRF SRF forgiveness or 0%. The 2.589 that's not eligible, I'm going to pull from retained earnings. So we have no general obligation bond. So there's no general obligation bond in this scenario. There's 6.6 of the 40 million, which is 2.6, and then 37.5 million at 0%. That's how I'm looking at this.
okay.
And that I am more certain with the information I have today than I am with the hope that concrete goes down from 500 cubic yards to 100. So again, I too think in terms of timing, and that's why I'm looking at this as what's in the hand, what I know I can say for the town, and what's in the best interest from a financing standpoint. Now, if I was making the decisions, I might say, let's delay going to bid on that a little bit longer unless the DEP forces us. I mean, I drag my feet as much as I could so I could see whether or not those costs are dropping and what are the indicators for that. That's just how I act prudently, to Sean George's point, is how can we delay this where we don't get fined, where we're still eligible, and yet we can give time to those costs going down. Because in the end, if the bid comes in at less than the appropriation, that we're not gonna go borrow more money than what we need. We'll only borrow what we need. So that's how I frame all these financial matters.
Right, so where do we go from here, guys?
Well, I mean, if I were seeing this for the first time and there was a $43 million price tag, I probably wouldn't think too much into that and just say, well, that's what it is, blah, 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 we move on. But when we approved the 32 million in 2019, I still don't understand why we didn't move forward then. This is
That was
kind of, now we're asking for 43. So I look, okay, now we're asking for 43, we're moving forward. So, and we haven't, you know, when we got the 32, we didn't go out to bid. I don't know what, if we were at the 90% back when we had the 32 million. But all I'm thinking about, go ahead.
The
Yeah.
32 million was at a concept, it was at a 10%. One of the things that we like to do, and that's why sometimes we hesitate, is we don't want to give false impressions, but that was at a 10% design, a conceptual design. And a lot has changed, as Helen pointed out, since then. And, you know, sometimes when you're completely transparent, you put those numbers out there and you get them out as early as you can. We were also being driven by the requirements of holding a certain hearing, of getting our application in. And I mean, there's so many pieces that we have to meet along the way that we can establish a false expectation. And I get your point, Dennis, but it's unfortunately the trap we can fall into by adhering to what the requirements that we must follow. So I do get what you're saying. I do.
On page two of the environmental partners letter dated November 22nd, it says the factors that were contributed to the increased costs are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All of it relating to construction costs, wage costs, and all COVID related, you know, electric, everything. So the 9.1 million is being solely driven by simply because it's not 2019 anymore, it's 2021 and 2022.
It's a fair point, but the process itself, from 10% design to 50% design to 85, I mean, there are steps that just take time in the process. And I think Helen pointed to that this is an unreasonable time frame.
So back then there was no, in 2019, and there's no way we could have gone out to bid to secure a cost at that.
That's
time.
correct. That's correct.
Correct.
There's no way we could have.
So Tony, for forgiveness, let me go back to forgiveness, because I think you said it's like 6.6, right? Is the
Yes.
forgiveness percentage?
Yes.
So we would be eligible for that if we have our signed contracts by June 30th of 2022, correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yep.
So to go to the earlier point, I'm not saying we do it on June 29th, but we still have a little bit of time to allow things to come down in price on fixed costs. I don't see labor changing, to be honest with you. I just see that staying. And once labor gets to a point, it never goes down. But we do have the ability to string that out a little bit longer to watch the costs and be able to monitor those, because I don't see them going up. But to the point, we want to see them coming down significantly. So, I mean, if we can play that card as close as possible, I'm not happy about the number, but I'd be happy about the opportunity, if that makes sense, versus us rushing to get this done so that we can start. I would put that, Michael, in your world to,
Yeah.
you know, play the cards to the vest as close as possible. Because I'm not saying I'm Nostradamus, but
Yeah.
you know, we shouldn't be paying $500 a cubic yard in July, August, September of 2022, when the construction would start. So we need to get a better grasp on exactly what the real costs are going to be once the project starts. So,
Yeah, Sean, I agree with that. And I think that's, certainly our focus. And when I said at the council meeting, we've gotten to this point with the engineers, with the cost estimators, going through different iterations and hitting certain benchmarks. Now that we're at 95, 90% design and they're just finishing up, what we're required to build, now that the work starts for us, quite frankly. So I think your point's well taken, and I completely agree. I also, if there's an opportunity for us to procure it in such a way as we benefit more on the downside, on the backside of the contract, if material prices go down, then we'll structure it that way. Absolutely. So there are a couple things that, a couple ideas there that you've given me that we'll definitely pursue, along with the stuff that we know we're going to do to trying
Right,
to
but
tap additional
where-
ARPA funds and so
But
forth.
how many companies out there would build things like this? I mean, the pool of responses are probably not going to be like 10. You're probably going to get a few, and we're showing our cards. We got $43 million on the table, sort of,
No, that's it. But Dennis, it's the same thing with the school. It's really the process is very, very similar to the school. It's just more technical. It's more technical construction. But we appropriated 80.6 million, and the bid came in at what, 58, 59 for the actual construction. So an overall savings of, I don't know, 10, 12 million dollars in that range. So these companies, they shouldn't be colluding. That's illegal. But I would say you probably have for the water plant. I think we got 7 different bids for the water treatment plant. So this is a great
Yeah,
project.
that's a lot.
I wouldn't,
That's good.
I wouldn't, and quite honestly, I think we've proven that we are tough town to work for, but a fair town to work for. So I
Mike,
think you'll see some good stuff.
Michael, could you be a little clearer for me in this moment, maybe the council members here, the timeline, because we have the June 30th is what date? What do we need? What do we need in the spring? Can you go through that again?
Sure. So working backwards, from a June 30th contract signing. So you're looking at probably a May, end of April, very beginning of May release of the RFP. Obviously, I should step back. You have to release the sub bid contracts, and then sub bidders have an opportunity to bid. Usually, it's about a week to 2 week period. Once you open the sub bids and they're analyzed and they're awarded or listed as eligible subcontracts for the general contractor to use, then you've got about another 2 weeks to open up the general contract. So going backwards from end of June to sign a contract, you probably need a week or so to negotiate the contract. The other details other than price. So you're probably mid, so that's June 30th, June 15th, May 15th. So I would say definitely by the early May, you should have your RFPs out on the street, both the subs and the general. Prior
So
to that, yeah, go ahead.
So then when does this vote, what's contingent upon this vote? Any of that starting?
All of that starting. DEP won't let you move forward unless you've actually done the appropriation. And as you know, they won't, you can't move forward in the SRF loan program unless you vote. So, but I think it's the important part is you need the appropriation in order to go out to do the RFP.
And then you can move the process as close to ending in June 30th as possible in order to give time for some of these costs maybe to stabilize or to go down. But
Mhm.
we don't have a lot of wiggle room in this decision-making process. I want to make clear that if we hold off and we don't do anything till May, then we're not going to meet that June 30th deadline.
Correct. Yeah.
So getting back to my biggest sticking point here is, I'm sure the cost is what it is. I'm sure we need to do it and all that, but my biggest concern is our dancing partners and getting other people to help us pay for this. And I'm not still clear on what the university's role is. I think the university's role is the same as the ratepayers are. They
That's
will,
correct.
their rate will, but I mean, isn't there some sort of an agreement between the town and the university that they pay a flat fee? Is that still, no, nothing's in
Nope.
place?
Nope,
Okay.
they pay just as any other tier 3 ratepayer would pay.
Okay,
So here's our leverage. Our leverage is this. We have the capacity, as Mr. Dutton has pointed out, regarding our discharge, right? And we get that permits. We have built a plant, or we have a plant that has to be set to handle the spike periods of BSU between the fall and the spring, right? If they weren't one of our partners, our plant to meet that group that we're talking about, that are the residents and or commercial, the capacity could be much less. If we could still maintain that capacity, then we could expand the system and maybe it would bring on developers. So there is a direct tie to building a plant to meet that particular special demand of the university. That's the lever that Michael and I have talked about using when we go to meet with them, that this plant has to be structured with this capacity and it has to be set aside a certain capacity to meet the demand of the university. So there is a correlation outside of the rates that is different for BSU. And that would be our lever.
I mean,
Michael,
different in the aspect of they're gonna pay a heck of a lot more, or different I mean,
Different in this sense, we have a position to say this plant is set up to meet your needs. If you weren't here, BSU, we wouldn't have this demand being put us for that period of time. And we have to basically lock down that capacity for your institution.
I mean,
So
are they aware? I mean, are they aware of what we're doing here and what kind of bill they're gonna potentially get down the road?
Michael,
Oh, yeah. Yeah. No, and you know, we're talking as if sort of we're
What are they gonna
negotiating.
want? What are they gonna want from us?
Yeah, there goes our $58,000 gift
Right.
every year.
Right,
No, I think, you know, we're talking as if the university is who we're negotiating with. It's actually,
that's not
from my perspective, we are marching into DCAM hand in hand saying, look,
right.
you know, both, you know, Bridgewater State and Town of Bridgewater walking into DCAM saying, look, you have to help us offset, and using the arguments that Tony sort of laid out, you know, briefly, that but for BSU being in this town, we wouldn't be faced with such an enormous capital expense. So
that's
that's,
why the forgiveness,
Oh,
the forgiveness should be 60%, not 6.6%.
and honestly, if that's an angle, if we can say, look, you know, in lieu of, you know, DCAM trying to fork up ARPA money for us, if you can give us, you know, a far greater principal forgiveness number, I'll take it. I'll take it however it comes.
And
But
to
we'll
that-
make all those arguments.
And to that point, you're absolutely right. Thank you for clarifying that, because BSU's rates would be decreased if we can get DCAM to come to the party, because it would impact them as well as any other user.
Right.
is the, go ahead, Bill.
I was gonna say, so that's a great point, Tony, because, you know, Sean's neighborhood probably doesn't have a sewer line. Mine won't get a sewer line because it would have to cross the river. But there's a lot of people out there that would probably opt into the ability to join the, you know, the system if they could. It is a rule that if there's a sewer line passing by your property, you can opt in. I know that from the days we were trying to plug
Yeah.
up BSU, but I imagine that, Sean's neighborhood probably didn't get it. I think Dennis has it. None of my neighbors have it. I think maybe it's up on High Street. I don't know, but I can see how we could have expanded into the residential areas if we didn't have the university consuming 30%. And I think that's an important point for the partnership.
And so,
I did have one question for you, Tony. So the 6.6 and the 0% are not an either or, you get both. Is that correct?
correct, that's correct.
Thanks.
One other
Is
thing,
the,
that- I'm sorry, go ahead,
well,
Sean.
just, is the prison on?
No, they have
No.
their own treatment facility.
Okay, thanks. Go ahead, Tony. I apologize.
Oh, no, that's okay. One thing that we're already Michael and I talked about this today, and we're gonna talk with Azu. So one of the things, when a new development, and we have some developments that will be coming on board while we're in the process of making this whole plan happen. So one of the things that we haven't raised is called I call it in the world that I know of finance, we call it a systems development fee, right? What we mean by that is if I connect into a system that's worth $70 million, all right? I never paid into that system, all right? So we are working on calculating when someone connects into this system that is a developer, we charge currently X for the connection. We're working with our advisor here. We're gonna have to adjust that. Now that's good and bad. Number one, it'll be another revenue stream and it can offset the cost of this. And we haven't done that yet, but we will have that in place before this plant gets close to being fully operational. The bad part is it is a cost that gets passed on to the developer. There's nothing good about that from the developer standpoint, but it addresses the issue. You're buying into a multi-million-dollar system. And when you buy in, you actually buy in with an investment because you're going to now have this for all those that are part of your development. We think that that needs to be looked at, and we're going to look at that as well.
That's right, because I bought in, I paid $10,000 to buy in 20 years,
That's right.
20 years ago. I don't know what it costs now to get it, tie in.
So we are going to look at all of that.
Dennis, to your point, I don't think we've changed the rates
No.
in probably a couple decades.
It's time
Significantly.
to
So it's
look.
time to review, yeah, it's time to do a complete analysis and review the rates. And honestly, we don't want to, we're not going to price ourselves out of the market, so to speak, in terms of what Tony's talking about. But they need to be updated so that they're not too low and not too high.
Well,
this-
true, but as Tony said last month, Tuesday night, 85%, a ratepayer is looking at an 85% increase. So that's just on this loan, right? That's just on this loan. Now, if if we got to see an 85% increase just on this loan, and then you're going to adjust the rates because we haven't been paying.
Well, no,
That is another increase. Then you got phase two coming down the road. The only thing I'm uncomfortable with is I would be much more comfortable voting on this if I knew if we were going to get ARPA money and how much we were getting. If the state could give us more towards this 43 million because of the university, if that 6.6% could be higher, I'd be much more comfortable knowing that than saying, here's $43 million. And then you can come back and say, I tried, but and all I can think about is Mr. and Mrs. Ratepayer getting that bill when this hits their mailbox.
So one other funding source that I was holding to use for the municipality, for the town of Bridgewater, when phase two came along is I did an analysis and I found that we have some additional reserves in our sewer betterment fund. And that has to do with administrative assessment and interest that the town earned when it became the bank for those individuals that funded their sewer betterment through the town's funding program. In fact, we act as the bank, right? So because very, very little of these funds were touched and most of the debt service came from the sewer rates, I have an additional $1.9 million that I could apply to phase one. And I'm saying that transparently because all along I had considered that because we had retained earnings in phase one, we could avail ourselves to, that I would hold those until phase two came along. But if you were so inclined to minimize the impact, I would move that 1.9 million to our retained earnings, and then that would reduce the borrowing amount by exactly $1.9 million. So I'm always looking at what are other ways that we can fund these projects, and in fact, how do we fund them under different scenarios? And so that would change that particular scenario if that would help, because it's definitely going to alleviate the cost of phase one. And Michael, we spoke today and you talked about phase two. And in phase two, do you envision there may be more leverage from our side with DEP or EPA on that phase? What's your thoughts?
So, yeah, again, it's like, I don't want to make promises that, I know I can't keep, but in this case, I think demonstrating the cost escalation on this project, especially if we, if we draw in our other, SRF participants to demonstrate the cost escalation of their projects, because it's across the board, it's not just us. So if we have a united front, we go to the EPA and say, look, obviously nitrogen is your most important discharge right now, or the most important thing you want to try to control right now, and we'll control that nitrogen, but we need some relief on the phosphorus. So it's very similar to what we did 4 years ago, when we said, look, we can't in good conscience, make the ratepayers, hit them with and physically we can't meet, we can't comply with the discharge numbers. So give us another 5 years on the phosphorus. And then we've got a little bit more flexibility on phase two. But that's just an idea at this point. And, a little more analysis is needed before we figure out if that's actually a good idea to try to pursue that or not. So.
And I didn't arbitrarily use in my estimates 1.9 million for phase two. What drove that is we would anticipate only interest rate reduction or cap at 2%. There was no reference to, from Helen of the Environmental Partners, of getting a 0% interest. So of course I took that additional reserves and said, hey, at some point you don't want to pay 2%. If you don't have to, let's use some reserves. So it wasn't arbitrary that I put that 1.9 million down on phase two. It was because we weren't getting money at 0%.
You guys know where the school buildings tie in, or how they manage waste?
Our sewer system.
Did they pay a rate?
This,
But isn't that a vicious circle?
it is, but I just, to answer Bill's question, I can't remember if we decided that we would abate those. I know we abated town buildings because, you're right.
I
that's a
think
vicious
there was,
circle.
Michael, I think there was some backflow charges. I can pull up and see if they're a billing customer. I will certainly
Yeah.
look at that.
Does Rainham pay a portion of the high school?
Well, it would be a regional school expense. That's why I just can't remember. I think we may have, on the Bridgewater schools, we may have abated, but not on the regional, because that was a regional entity.
Okay,
But we'd have to look, Bill.
because if it's regional and they're paying, then it would be in the assessment. It's not quite a vicious circle, because Rainham would pay into the assessment and pay for their whatever percentage. Okay. That's fine.
Right, but for instance, water bills for town buildings, it, we were paying that, when I arrived, and I said, well, what's the point? 99.9% of the town is on water, so you either, yeah.
Yeah.
They-
I think the only point is that this is an enterprise fund, and then by doing that, you're saying we're subsidizing it, and that's fine, because it in fact becomes a subsidy, because the town buildings are not being paid, are not being charged, and I'm looking up right now, I do not think that they get a water or sewer bill, but,
And I'm pretty sure Rainham does the same thing for the school buildings in Rainham. And my
Right.
vicious circle is if we're paying that at the regional level, then we're paying it on the percentage of students that we have. So we'd be paying it, we're paying for the kids
Right.
that we're sending.
Right, but if
That's-
we're not sending them a bill, then we should send them a bill and give them more money in the assessment to cover the Bridgewater portion of the bill.
yeah, so.
But there's your cycle, there's your cycle.
There's your
No.
cycle though, and then you're gonna do the same thing for Rainham. There's your cycle.
Right. Right, so,
Yes, but it's Bridgewater plant. It's not a regional plant. It's not a Rainham plant. What I'm saying is that if Rainham students are flushing the toilet in the high school, then, that money should come across too.
Well, anyway.
Just put signs on the door that say Bridgewater students only.
I don't see anything that says Bridgewater, Rainham. I don't
All
think,
right.
I think they pay for some backflow, some actual labor. People go out there and do some testing. But I don't believe, and so does Rainham handles it the same way. I don't believe they're paying for water or sewer, but I will certainly, I think it's important that we know. I can get that answer.
Stay away from the Porta Johns bill, okay? That won't
Yeah.
count. All right, anyway.
All right, I think we beat this one.
Yeah, so I'm ready to move forward on this. I'm in favor of it, by the way. I think it is
Grudge-
aggressive, but
You calling for a vote?
calling for a motion.
I'll second the motion to vote.
I can make the motion, but I'll make a motion to,
This is going back to the council, no matter what we do, whether it's
Right.
0-3, 3-0, 1-2,
Correct.
2-1. It's going back to the council. The public hearing is going to continue.
Yeah.
Hopefully there'll be some more questions from the counselors. I'll probably ask some of the same questions on February 1st I'm asking tonight, and my thing that I'm honing in on is how much money can we get in help for this loan? That's what I want. That's what I want.
And to let you know, Dennis, to your earlier question, because I'm on the DEP website. So for the forgiveness, I just saw this, so it is determined on adjusted per capita income, which I'm assuming we're in the 60 to 80%. But here's something that's a little bit, is that the minimum loan forgiveness is 6.6. That's the
That's correct.
minimum.
That's correct.
So we can appeal to what we just talked about under the current circumstances.
right.
We know we're getting 6.6, but we push to get more than that. So I'm glad it doesn't say maximum of 6.6. It says minimum of 6.6.
That's correct.
So that, yeah, so we can say at a bare minimum, that's the forgiveness. But anyway, I just wanted to put that out there. All right, so
Thank you.
So my motion was to recommend this for approval at the council level. And
I'll second that motion.
all right. And so I'll ask myself first. I vote yes. Sean?
Yes.
No,
Dennis?
Dennis is a no.
Dennis is a no. Okay. All right.
Give me
That's
something I can-
that's like it's a no. I don't really want to say no, but I gotta say no.
Give me
And if
Yeah,
it was
that's all right.
40 million, if it was $43 million to start, it probably would have been a yes with reservation.
I already said yes to 32 million.
Yeah, that's right. All right, let's move on to 34, which is the acceptance of non-recurring revenue to cap.
Yeah. Give me something I can say yes to. I move to approve.
Move to
All right.
recommend.
I move to recommend.
All right,
Second that.
all right. Any discussion on this?
That's more than last year, right?
Yes,
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What is it, 3/20/24, 788? All right,
Mhm.
that's good. All right, any other discussion? No, Dennis, how do you vote?
Yes.
Sean, how do you vote?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. 3-0 to recommend for approval. All right, moving on to 35. This is the contractual buyout.
I'll move to recommend
I'll second that.
22035.
I will second that.
Any discussion? Questions, discussion? Hearing none. Dennis, how do you vote?
Yes.
John, how do you vote?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. 3-0 to recommend. All right, and next we have the 36, which is the acceptance of a donation.
Motion to recommend.
I'll second.
2,000. Is this for the,
For the reflective, it's for the
the-
Fire department.
reflective
Yeah.
things for the
No,
fire hydrants, right?
so,
no,
So-
this one is just a bequest from an estate.
Mhm.
So
I'm
this
sorry,
one
I'm ahead
doesn't
of
have
myself.
that restriction. Yeah.
so this is just safety equipment. Okay, all right, no questions on
Yep.
this one. All right, I'm sorry, that was Dennis first or Sean first?
Sean and Dennis. Sean
Nice.
motion, I second.
All right. Any other discussion? Hearing none. Sean, how do you vote?
Yes.
Dennis, how do you vote?
Yes.
I'm a yes also. Right, moving on to
36, 37.
37. Another donation of $10,000. And this is
I
the
do have a-
hydrants.
Do have a question on this. Michael, does this 10 grand cover the program?
I believe it does. Yeah.
Okay.
These aren't, very sophisticated markers. They're just reflective markers to be
No,
able to mark the hydrants.
No, that's, I mean, I'm more inclined to say thank you for not only the donation from Chuck Rins, but they're gonna cover the whole cost. So, I mean, I think that in itself, for them to see that bill and say, we'll take care of it is great.
Very good.
We have enough hydrants. I independently priced out those markers, so
For the,
I know what they cost.
motion to recommend.
Second,
Yeah.
I wanna hear
Any other
that from
discussion?
did you put in any money, Bill?
you. There you go. Crying out loud.
I just don't want to give any money back. I think it's a great donation. I really appreciate Chuck Run stepping forward on this. All right, hearing no other discussion. Sean, how do you vote?
Yes.
Dennis, how do you vote?
Yes.
All right, I'm a yes.
Hey, Michael, can I, this is a little bit off topic per se. You're including a check from someone, black out the account number. I know it's public information, but
Oh,
I don't think it's a
yeah.
good practice to have
Yeah.
that in the
Yeah.
packet.
Nope,
I don't
That's
think,
agreed.
yeah, I
That's a
don't
good
think the
catch.
check itself doesn't have to be in the packet at all.
Yeah, unless the check has to, I'd keep the check out. But if the check has to, you gotta get all that information off the check on
Yeah,
the
for
copy.
sure.
No, point well taken.
Yeah.
I deal with that every day. But anyway, go ahead. I digress.
All right, we're up to the
Why don't we-
capital plan, 38. This is the revised capital plan.
So, Michael, I got a question for you in regards to what's not on here unless I missed it. So, we've been talking about the old town hall, and I know from what you've told us that there are there are issues within the town hall that need to be addressed for all intents and purposes, for us to have any opportunity to repurpose that, whatever direction we go into. So I didn't see anything on the capital plan about addressing even some of what needs to be done. So is this not something that is in scope for this year, but maybe next year? And the reason I'm saying that is we're running out of time for that building to be empty and not used. And for the issues that we have now, if it goes unaddressed, those issues tend to morph.
Yeah, no, that's a good point, Sean. The Old Town Hall, there's a committee, I put together a committee, couple folks from the Cultural Council, Marilee's on it, Pete, Rod Pellegrini. And so I gave them the feasibility study that was completed that sort of laid out a plan for that building. So they're going to come back with recommendations. Originally, I said I'd love to have recommendations back by May so that we can begin planning for grant applications. My guess is it's going to take longer than that, which is fine because, you know, I built in a lot of time within that timeline for them. So you're right. If they come back with a plan that we can write a grant for, we'll write a capital grant to look at improvements to that building, whether it's, you know, complete HVAC, the roof has to be done. There's a lot of stuff that has to be done in that building. So, but there are, depending on what they recommend, there are grants for a good chunk of that. So right now the roof does not leak. It looks terrible, but it does not leak. The heat, the boiler blew, I think 3 years ago. So we have some temporary heat in there. So we are anticipating that that committee will come back with some recommendations and then we'll go from there.
So there's nothing that you foresee in fiscal year 2023 that you're going to need. I'm just going to position it this way, to maintain the integrity of the building.
No, we've done maintenance and paint on the exterior of the building. So we're pretty good there. Obviously, as I said, the roof is in bad shape. In 2023, that if we don't have grant opportunities there, then yeah, we'll come back and look for capital funding to do pieces of it. But yeah,
I can say we do have some money set aside. A few years back, Michael, we put aside like 50,000. I just have to have Laurie check to see what we have for a balance for just that, those types of things. If we needed to act on something, we had some funds available.
Yeah, I this is just for a bigger conversation, not for this. I don't want to go off on a tangent, but I drive by it every so often, and I look at it and I say I can only imagine what's going on the inside. So I just would like to be able to do something proactively, at least to do an assessment so that we don't have another thing that just happens to it because it's not being used. People aren't seeing it. They're not going in there. But anyway, that's a bigger discussion. All right. Sorry, that's the only question I have.
The question I have on the capital plan, I will approve it, but the IT amounts, Michael, can you just explain, the memorial building, every we need more money every time we turn around for that one, but we need to do it. So the memorial building renovations for $75,000 for technology improvements, and then the asset type is machinery, equipment, and vehicles. What is that for? Right.
So when we planned the memorial building, we did not incorporate, some of the shorter term, technology necessities for it, for the DPW use. So when we did the memorial building, we wanted the capital for the building itself to reflect, what it took to get that building back to, the beautiful, historic building that it is. Give it handicapped accessibility and give it accessibility between the two floors. So this is just, the improvements that will be needed partially in that building and partially in terms of equipment to allow it to be used for a DPW office. So the asset type,
That, if I can, Michael, the reason, when you go to do your switch boxes, if you had internet connections, if you have routers, that's considered from an asset type machinery or equipment.
does that
So it's-
answer the question, Dennis?
Typically
Yeah.
hard things.
But it would be upgrading their equipment that they use out in the field, right? Or is this just like faxes and copy machines and things like that inside the building?
Yeah,
Because it
this-
says vehicles, it says vehicles here. What do we,
Well, okay, and
No, we gotta-
this is an accounting categorization.
Yeah.
It's either or, it's not and, there's no vehicles.
okay,
But to answer your question though, Dennis, it's what's included within the building. It's
okay.
not,
Right.
field stuff. There's a separate, I think we appropriated some funding last time for separate field stuff.
I would have thought that the technology improvements would have been captured in the entire renovation project.
Well,
I have a couple of questions. One is, I see library roof repairs and senior center roof repairs, but I hear the town hall needs roof repairs and it's not on here. Is there a reason why it was left off?
the old town hall.
The old town hall, yeah.
Yeah, no, and that's what I was saying to Sean. We are looking at potentially, it's on the capital list. We're looking at potentially getting grant funding, outside funding to do that. So didn't want to, it doesn't leak right
Okay.
now. It looks
Holding
terrible.
strong, holding in on.
I have Flex Seal downstairs if you need to borrow some.
We got a blue
Ghosts.
tarp.
The ghosts are having a good time in there.
Yeah. The second question is the 12,000 on the garage heater for the fire station. Is that something that can be moved to the new fire station, or is that a cost that in a couple of years just ends because it's no longer useful?
It can't be moved, and it's two heaters. No, but before we had one on there, they needed two. Because the heaters that they had were not functioning, and these are bay heaters that get situated out
Yeah.
where the trucks and the equipment are
Sure.
located.
Sure. I have a couple questions about the high school track. So we're responsible for 60% of the track costs, which is marked here at 509, which brings up the total cost to be 844. But I don't remember any sort of presentation or list of what 844 buys the district, or what 509 our portion buys. Did you see a presentation or a breakdown of any of those items? Because isn't that higher than what they replaced the other track for?
No
Uh,
present,
Yeah,
Go
we
ahead,
haven't seen I was just gonna say, we haven't seen a presentation. Our practice is to get the capital list from the school and then try to accommodate that within our capital plan. But we haven't seen, since we don't justify the capital expenses that the school requests.
I
We
get that,
certainly
yeah.
have to justify all the capital requests that our department heads makes, but in this
Yeah,
case,
I believe
This-
either this week or next week, they're actually doing their budget presentation. So within that bill, I would expect them to cover, I
Yes.
mean, that's a significant cost. I expect it to be within their budget presentation. I don't know if it's this Wednesday or it may be next Wednesday. I don't remember.
so to that point, they also vote, they must have a process in which they review the capital priorities, and that they then vote that's their capital plan. And the objective, they did reference in the initial documents at their meeting we had with them, Michael, they did identify all their capital items, and we reconciled to what they were presenting to that joint meeting we had with Rainham and the school committee and the finance committee from those locations. So it is part of their process.
No further questions from me. Any other discussion? Anybody want to make a motion?
I'll make a motion to recommend.
Second,
No other discussion? All right, Sean, how do you vote on that?
Yes.
Dennis?
yes.
I'm a yes. All right. Moving on to, we don't have a 39, we moved to 40. Is that right?
Correct.
What does BPA stand for? Oh, Bridgewater Police
Bridgewater-
Association. Okay, yeah.
I move to approve order FY 22040.
I'll second to recommend.
Second to recommend.
Any other discussion?
So Tony, this is just contract, and I forget what the term is to bring them up under the new contract. We had some money that we owed, or
Well, and in fact, going forward, we're going to attach the transfer request. You approved the bargaining unit agreement,
right.
and this is the funding of that agreement.
So this is the catch up. Okay. Yeah, that I just wanted to
Yeah.
confirm that. Okay.
That's it, sir.
Any other discussion? Dennis, how do you vote?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. That's 3-0 Breckland. Are we at the end of the list?
Adjourn. We have nothing else before us, so we don't need to meet before the 1st, right, Bill?
Right.
Okay.
It just catches us. I just asked, there are no other citizens that popped in while we were here, right?
I don't see anybody.
Don't see a soul.
There is no one else on.
All right, so Deborah, I often also put public comment at the end, but that's okay. All right, so I think
Motion to adjourn.
there you go.
Second,
All right, no discussion. Sean, how do you vote on that?
recommend.
Yes. No, this is to adjourn. We don't recommend adjourn. Jeez.
Dennis, how do you vote?
Yes.
All right, and I'm a yes, so we are adjourned at 7:13. All right, thank you, everyone.
Have a
Thank
good
you
night,
all.
gentlemen. And Deb and Laurie, have a good night.